Hello. Today we'll share the word from Daniel chapter 3 verse 24. I'll read verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel, and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve, nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, language, which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Yes, I read up to verse 30. So Nebuchadnezzar made a big image of gold on the plain of Dura, and when the sounds of the instruments were made, not only the Babylonians, but all people of Judah were ordered to bow. If they did not bow, then they would be thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Daniel's 3 friends said, We can't do that. God will save us, but even if He doesn't, we can never bow down to the image of gold. King Nebuchadnezzar got very mad and was enraged, right? That is why the fire of the burning furnace was made 7 times hotter, and soldiers, mighty men, they were given this task and took up these men to be thrown into the fire. However, what we must think here is, these 4 men who took up the men, who are these people? They are people who worship the image of gold. Those people that thought that if Daniel's 3 friends were thrown into the fiery furnace, that they would surely burn. But oppositely, they did not think that they would burn. However, in the Bible, something strange happened. The men that took them up, here in verse 22, Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flames of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the men who took them up, the people who did not even enter the fiery furnace, were burned and killed. On the contrary, the men who took them up thought, we won't die, but those punks who didn't serve the idol, those punks who didn't burn down to the image of gold, those punks are done for. They were thinking that they would surely burn and die in the fire, and they were thrown in. King Nebuchadnezzar made the order, but was very worried, thinking, did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego really burn away? When he went closer and saw, Surely 3 people were thrown in, but 4 people were not burned at all and were walking around. He was shocked. So here, verse 27, and the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an angel, an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. So all the princes saw everything. Then Nebuchadnezzar praises the Lord. You did not serve idols, but only served God, and He saved you. I praise that Lord. So we read the scene where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were raised to the highest place outside of the Babylonians. When I think deeply and meditate on this word, I can see a strange world of God inside of this word. So the people who took them up were those who served the idols. What did they think? When they take up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to throw them in, these punks who don't serve idols will surely burn to death. But they thought that they themselves wouldn't burn. However, the ones who took them up were burned to death. And did they know that they would really die? They surely thought, we will not die. They thought like that. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the furnace, but they themselves were burned. There are many times we think like this and live. So I thought about myself when I first started to smoke. My friends were like this. Hey, if you can't smoke, what kind of man are you? It is not that if you smoke, you're a man, and if you don't smoke, you're not a man. But because of the thought that my friends would make fun of me and throw me away, I thought, if I don't smoke, I'll be teased by my friends and thrown away. So my friends, they would suck on the cigarette, blow out, and release the smoke. And sometimes they would make donuts with the smoke. And it's not that they would just make one donut, but 2, 3, 4. And some friends would say, wow, that's cool. When I first sucked on the cigarette, my head went dizzy, I was sneezing, and I thought I was dying. But if I sneezed there, wow, this guy sneezes after that small inhale, your head hurts? I thought that my friends would point their fingers and despise me, so I acted as if my head didn't hurt. Although my head hurt a lot. So I held in my headaches and sneezes again and again, and like that, I learned how to smoke. If I follow what my friends want, then my friends won't throw me away. I followed this thought, doing according to how they wanted, and it was like bowing to the idol and being dragged. If I smoke and drink, then I will make lots of friends, and they will make me happy. This is all I thought about while living. Now this is what the Bible says. If you embrace the fire, won't your clothes burn? These words mean that if you embrace the fire, then surely your clothes will burn. But just how humans believe in the foolish thoughts that they will not burn while living, right, if I smoke, my friends will become my friends and play with me, and I'll be happy. This is the only thought we have. Just how if you embrace the fire, your clothes will surely burn, if I believe in this kind of thought while living, then it'll burn up my life. In reality, the people who took them up, smoking, will make me into a lung cancer patient. But we're never afraid of that. But actually, the people who took them up, as they were serving the idol, thought, if I bow to the image of gold, then the king will raise me up. All of my friends are worshiping the image of gold, so I should too. Now, like that, they followed the king's orders, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who did not worship the idol, were thrown into the fire. Now, in reality, the God inside of them is so beautiful, but they stepped on him and threw him away. The people who serve God live a beautiful life, but hey, look at those that believe in Jesus. They're so trite. So they step on these people, they serve themselves, and serve the pleasures of the flesh, which eventually burns their lives up. And I didn't know that, and continued smoking. And later on, I couldn't quit. It's the same with drinking. I have to study. But when I meet a friend, they say, hey, let's have a drink. Then I shouldn't follow my heart, but if you can't drink, what kind of man are you? I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. So the fear that my friends would throw me away. But because of that fear, I drank the first round, second round, and later on, I even went to a bar and prostitute house. And without me knowing, I was being dragged in that direction. And I didn't believe that I would fail going this way. It's just like the people who took them up believed that Daniel's 3 friends would burn and die when placed inside of the furnace, but they did not believe that they would ever burn. Even I, as I served myself in the flesh, I followed my friends and became friends, smoking and drinking together. I thought that happiness was going on trips and hiking together. However, this Bible says, as the people who took them up approached the furnace, the flames burned them to death. Although the scary fire of the furnace was heading towards them, they did not know and went towards it and burned to death. Likewise, my life was being deceived by Satan. I was dragged however Satan in the flesh desired, and eventually had no choice but to burn and die. However, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thought, I served myself, but there is no happiness there. If I cannot serve God here, it's better just to burn and die. I can no longer serve the idol. They decided in their hearts and did not bow to the image of gold. At that time, Nebuchadnezzar was very angry and ordered his mighty men, catch these punks immediately and throw them into the fiery furnace. That was the order, and Daniel's friends eventually went inside the furnace. But here, a miracle occurred. Not a hair of their head was singed, neither were their coats changed. nor did the smell of fire pass on them.
거기에 왜 그렇게
Why were they not singed
냄새도
or have the smell of fire pass on to them?
그렇게 버려졌을 때
When they were thrown away,
예수님이 함께
Jesus was together with them there.
한 사람,
One person, 3 people were surely thrown,
사람이 아닌 신의
but there the form of God, Jesus, was walking together with them.
그들은
They believed
분명히 자기가 불못 속에
that
들어가면
once they entered the furnace,
거기서 하나님이 자기들을
God would protect them.
믿었던 거죠. 그때
At that time,
여기 성경은 아까도 읽었는데
I read here in the Bible, before 2 in verse 27, the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, when they came
거슬려지지도 않고
and saw that they were not singed or smelled burnt,
보면서
then they said that God that they were serving was real.
우리가
The image of gold we were serving was fake.
그 하나님을 찬양합니다.
Let us praise that Lord.
느부갓네살이 하나님을
And
찬양합니다.
Nebuchadnezzar was praising the Lord.
반대로
On the other hand,
지금까지
up until now,
2장에서
in chapter 2,
느부갓네살이 꿈을 꿨는데
Nebuchadnezzar dreamed
무슨 꿈을 꾼지를 모르고
and did not know what he dreamed of. He called the magicians, astrologers, soothsayers, and said, "Find out what kind of dream I dreamed.
만약에 너희가
If you guys cannot figure it out, I will cut your bodies into pieces,
그리고 너희
and I will consider your houses to be dunghills."
그래서 그것이 무서워서
So they were afraid of this, and that is why they served the idol.
여기 오늘 이
But here today in verse 29, what does Nebuchadnezzar say?
사드락 메삭
Every people
아벤누가 섬기는 하나님을
that speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces,
그들은 내가 몸을 쪼개버리겠다. 걸음터를
and their houses shall be made a dunghill.
아니, 이 장에서는
In chapter 2,
만약에 이 꿈을
he said if they could not interpret his dreams,
쪼개버리고
then their bodies would be cut into pieces
걸음터를 삼겠다.
and made a dunghill,
반대가 되고
but now it's the opposite.
이 사드락,
Anyone
메삭,
who
아벤누가
speaks amiss against the God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego
이제 몸을 쪼개버리고
will be cut into pieces and considered as a dunghill.
느부갓네살
These are the words
입에서 이런 말이
that
나옵니다.
came out of Nebuchadnezzar.
그 느부갓네살은
That Nebuchadnezzar was someone who served idols
또 금시상
and also made an image of gold,
사람들이 그렇게
and when everyone served him,
자기를 섬겨줄 때
he was so pleased.
이 사람의 마음이 변했어.
So this person's heart changed. When he saw whose God? When he saw the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his heart completely changed,
바꿔가지고
and instead of cutting apart the bodies of the people who didn't serve the idol,
조롱하는 그
it would be the people who didn't serve the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
그러면서
Then
쓸 수 없는 말을 느부갓네살 왕이
King Nebuchadnezzar says the things that could never be said.
그러면서
And then in verse 30,
왕이 드디어
then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
어떻게 해서
So how were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego
높은 위치에
able to be promoted?
자기 몸을 버렸다.
They threw away their bodies. Sure,
내가 하나님
I will serve God
너희들에게
and be thrown away by you. I'm going to serve God. With this heart, they feared God, and God promoted them to the highest place. On the other hand, the people who served the idol thought, if I serve the idol like this, the king will promote me. They believed in this heart while serving the idol, but could not realize the fact that their bodies were going to be cut apart and their houses would become a dunghill because their eyes were darkened and they were in deep darkness. They could not see
향하고 결국에는
The path that they were going to would lead to their bodies being cut apart and their houses becoming a dunghill.
못 본 거죠. 그 사실을 깨달을
They
수가
could
없어요.
not realize this truth.
근데 하나님은
But God,
이 말씀을 통해
through this word,
에베소서 말씀을 보면서 놀라운
I was able to
사실을
realize this
발견할
amazing
수
truth
있습니다.
while reading the words of
자,
Ephesians.
에베소서 1장
In Ephesians chapter 1,
18절에
verse 18,
너희 마음의
the
눈을
eyes of your
밝히라.
understanding being
이의
enlightened,
무엇이며
that ye may
선포하는
know what is the hope of his calling, and what the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints, and what is the exceeding greatness of his power to us who believe according to the working of his mighty power.
에베소서에 있는 성도들이
So for the congregation of Ephesians to precisely know this truth, Paul prayed and sought.
사람들이 눈이 어두워가지고
Because the eyes of man are so dimmed, they cannot believe God will exalt them when they serve God.
내가 나를 높이
You believe that if you serve yourself, follow the pleasures of the flesh, and get along with your friends, then your friends will exalt you and love you.
그 눈이
But that is having dimmed eyes.
사드락과 메삭
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego sought in front of God.
내가
God, if I serve this idol, I might be acknowledged by the people around me and comfortable for a moment, but then I will be thrown away eternally.
여기서
Please save me from here
내 눈을
and brighten my eyes.
그 기도를
According to this promise,
이 불무불에
they were really thrown into the fiery furnace, and afterward their eyes were really brightened.
놀라운 말씀이 하나
There's another amazing word in verse 21. For above all principality and power and might and dominion and every name that is named, not only in this world, but also in that which is to come.
아까 다니엘 3장
Before in Daniel chapter 3 verse 30, it says, promoted above all people in the province of Babylon,
그 방백
in front of all of the princes, counselors, and
이 바벨론의
the whole bureaucracy of Babylon, God showed how He protects the people who serve Him,
지켜주시는 정-
and they were promoted above all the people there.
그들의 모든 사람들 위에 높여졌습니다. 21절 말씀
Just like the words of verse 21, far above every name that is named, not only in this world, but also in that which is to come. The people who serve God will be placed above all principalities and people of this world.
1장 21절 말씀
Chapter 1, verse 23, and Daniel chapter 3, verse 30 are the same words. What kind of person does God promote?
내가
Even if I am thrown into the fiery furnace, I cannot serve any other idol than God.
다른 신은 없어. 그런 마음으로
With that heart,
하나님을 섬기고
when you serve God
하나님 말씀에
and are led by the word of God, then God said that He will place you above all other people.
반대로
On the contrary,
사드락 메삭 아벳느고를
the people who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego,
자기가 왜
the reason why
세상을
they wanted to throw them into the fiery furnace was that they thought the king would promote them.
그럴 줄 알았는데 그날
That's what they thought,
죽는데
but they died
내가
that day.
나를 섬기면
If I serve myself,
버림을
I will
받는다고.
eventually be thrown away.
그렇지만 내가
However,
섬기는 이것은
this
결국에
me that I am serving will eventually burn and die.
하나님의
If I do not have the wisdom of God, then I am the same as these people.
그 사실을 정확히
The people who precisely see this and are led in front of the Word of God,
그런 사람들을
these people
높이
will God
세우시는
promote very highly.
저는 이 성경을 배우고
As I stayed in the church and learned this Bible,
분명히 하나님이
God
그런
clearly taught me this truth.
살고자
Those who want to live shall die, and those who try to die shall live.
네가
If you live for yourself, then you will die.
그러나
However,
내가
many times God showed me, many times, that although I may be trampled on by people because of the gospel, or even die, if I have the heart to die only for this gospel, then God
자주 하나님
will save me. God showed me that so often.
내 마음속에
When I serve God inside of my heart, I am the happiest.
이 사드락과
That day, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thought that they would die in the fiery furnace. But when they served God, they surely saw how God safely protected them, and they were able to meet God inside of the fiery furnace. How thankful do you think they were? How happy do you think they were? God throws us into the fiery furnace in order to give us this kind of happiness. When we look with the eyes of man, when we are trampled on, persecuted, and mocked, it seems like God threw me away. At that time, I hope you can open the eyes of the world of God to see how God precisely protects and leads you. God opens these eyes to the people who have received salvation. That is why in Ephesians chapter 1 verse 18 it says, "The eyes of your understanding being enlightened." Many people do not have the brightened eyes that God gave, and they think they will be the happiest while living for the pleasures of the flesh and serving themselves. However, at times we are put in the pitiful position where we are trampled on by other people and thrown into the fiery furnace. But there, God makes me the safest. As it says here, not singed or have the smell of fire passed onto them. Like this, when I see how God protects me in the safest way, this is so amazing. When living inside of Jesus, oftentimes God showed me this kind of God. From now on, if there is time, I want to give testimonies about these aspects and share more about the word of Daniel. The more that I think about this word, the more a heated heart arises. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could have gotten mad when the mighty soldiers, were ordered by, this furious Nebuchadnezzar, and they could have thought, are we going to die today? They were thrown away like this. But from the mouth of Nebuchadnezzar, he praises the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When they heard this, how thankful they must have been. Wow, how can the king say that? Up until a little while ago, he said to throw us into the fiery furnace. But now that king is praising the God inside of us. After hearing this, I think about how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would praise God and return the glory to God, and how happy they must have been. The happiness of a Christian is here. Those people who are hardened and going against me will see the God inside of me. Because they do not know God inside of me, they are trampling on me. But one day, God will open their eyes to see the God inside of me, and they will praise God. If you think about this, so what if I'm trampled on a bit? So what if I'm thrown into the fiery furnace? This kind of God is together with them, and God amazingly saved them. If we think about this word, God shows to the ones who serve Him this amazing secret world through the words of God. And these eyes were opened. When I first received salvation, I was unable to see this world. And because I was afraid of being thrown away by my friends, if they said to go drink, at times I was dragged and I was unable to quit smoking. At first I was dragged often by these thoughts, but God, when I think about God who saved me, I'm so thankful. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fiery furnace, but saw how God protected them and had no choice but to praise God. I believe that God inside of you will also work like this. We will end the first session here today. Goodbye.
안녕하십니까.
Hello, everyone.
오늘은 다니엘
Today
3장
is Daniel chapter 3.
다니엘의 세 친구가 풀무불에
We will continue the story of Daniel's three friends being thrown into the fiery furnace. Actually, while preaching this word, I had the time
삶을 이렇게
to look back on my life.
그래서 오늘은 이 다니엘 3장에 나타난
That is why today I will give a testimony
세 친구가 풀무불에
about
던져진 것처럼
just how Daniel's three friends were thrown into the fiery furnace. God also threw me
던져졌던
into that kind of fiery furnace.
저는 간증한
Just like I testified,
대학교 3학년 때 구원을
I received salvation in my third year of college.
그리고 대학교 4학년
And after graduating from my fourth year of college, I went to the army.
그러니까 그때
At that time, I was 25 years old.
재수하고 삼수해가지고
And this is because I retook my college entrance exam twice.
4학년까지 졸업하고
And when I graduated after my fourth year,
너무 늦은 거예요. 그래서 저는
it was too late.
학사 장기를
That's why I took the exam to be an army officer and almost passed, but I failed the physical test.
너무 한편으로 원망스러운 거예요.
And on one side, I was complaining.
병으로 병으로
I didn't want to go as a lower-ranked private soldier. I didn't want to go as a private. I wanted to go as an officer.
허락하지 않는 거예요.
But God didn't allow it.
지원해서 또 빨리 가려고 했는데
I wanted to apply quickly and go, but I couldn't even apply.
10월달에 이제
So I graduated from college in December,
나중에 영장을 받아보니까
and after receiving an extension, they said it would come out in September. How can I wait till September?
이제 성교학교
So through this time, I was able to enter missionary school and receive training
군대를 가는데
before entering the military.
그때
Honestly, that time
저는 그때 당시 풀무불처럼
was like a fiery furnace to me.
근데 하나님이 제가 왜
And I was able to think about why God made me go as a private in the army through reading the Bible.
후서
If you look in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse
2장 3절 네가
Verse
그리스도의
3,
군사로
Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ.
다니는 자를 사기 생활에 얽매이는 자가
No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier.
다니엘의 세 친구는
So Daniel's three friends
그가 풀불에 던져진다
said
해도
that even though they were thrown into the fiery furnace,
절대로 금시상에 절하지 않겠다.
they would not bow down to the image of gold.
군인은 자기를 섬길 수가 없죠.
A soldier cannot serve himself.
사람을 기쁘게 하는 게 군인입니다.
Pleasing the person who recruited the soldier is a soldier, a good soldier of a Christian. God said that he would make me a good soldier of a Christian.
저를 군대에 보내서
He sent me to the army,
군인은 자기 생활에 얽매이는 자가
and there is no soldier who is free in their personal life,
군대로 모집한 주인을
only making the recruiter in the army pleased.
하나님의
The life of a Christian and the people of God do not live for their happiness, the pleasures of the flesh, and they do not serve themselves.
예수 그리스도 또 하나님의
Christians
뜻을 위해서
are those who give their bodies for Jesus Christ and God's pleasing will. That is a Christian. Although I received salvation, I did not know well about the real life as a Christian.
근데 우리나라 군대를 가면
I believed that God would teach me this world as I entered our country's army, and although I was afraid to enter as a low-ranked private,
쫄병으로 가서
I thought that going as a lower-ranked private was a process to teach me about the military life
성경을 통해서
through the Bible. That's what I thought about.
이제 논산훈련소에
When I went to the Nonsan Training Center, I got a buzz cut,
소형연대 들어갔는데
and on one side I was very afraid after entering the camp.
네, 이제 사복을 다
We
벗고 집에
changed
보내고
out of our civilian clothes
갈아입고
and changed into our military uniforms.
그때
At that time,
이제 그 종교 시간
I realized that there was time for religion.
전에 소용연대 있을
Before we received training and were in the camp,
세 개의 종교로 나누더라고요.
they split the religions into three:
기독교,
Buddhist, Christian, and Catholic.
하나를 이제 선택했어요.
They were saying to choose one of the three and try going to
그
service.
소용연대 그 교회를 처음
So I went to the church in the camp,
천장이 무척 높았어요.
and the ceiling was very high.
딱 예배당에 들어가 보니까
When I went to the chapel,
이제 붙어 있는 거예요.
there was a banner hanging.
세로로 붙어 있는 거.
It was hanging vertically,
엄청 높았는데
and although the ceiling was very tall,
그 천장에서 이 바닥으로 딱 내려 이제
the banner reached all the way from the ceiling down to the floor.
거기에 이제 무슨 말씀이
And the word that was recorded there was Job 22,
10절 나의 가는
verse
길을
10.
오직 그가
But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold.
하나님이 나를
God, through this army, will try me.
교회는 뭘로 만들기 위해서
In order to make what?
금처럼
To make me gold. Actually,
금강석을 돌이죠.
a diamond is a rock.
어떻게 추출하겠습니까?
How can you extract gold from within a rock?
던져버리는 거죠. 그러면
You have to throw it inside a blast furnace, then it'll melt.
뭐 철은 철, 흙은 흙, 은은
Then the stone, iron as iron, dirt as dirt, silver as silver, gold as gold will be separated, and you can extract the gold. To tell the truth,
던져버리는 거죠.
God threw me into the army.
이제
He threw me in,
귀한
and in the process of making me into precious gold,
과정의 훈련을
I felt like God would train me through the army.
나의 가는 길은
But he knoweth the way that I take.
단련한 후에 내가
When he hath tried
가는
me,
길 나도 모르고
I didn't know the way I was going.
살아야 될지
I didn't know how I needed to live, and I didn't know how God would lead me.
잘 몰랐습니다.
God sent this kind of me to the army,
하나님이 나를 이제 군대에 보내서 훈련하고 있었어요.
and he was training me.
우리가 이제 논산 훈련
So after receiving training at the Nonsan Training Center, we were dispatched to the front lines,
민간
and on the western front,
넘어서
just beyond
이제
the civilian control line,
선 이제 가까이 우리 이제
it was the 38th parallel that was very close to where our troops were stationed.
그 부대들은
There was,
막사라도 있는데 우리
there was usually a barracks,
거기서 공사
but we had tents set up and we were doing construction work.
대전차 방어구라고 이제 탱크나 전차들이
So anti-tank defenses, where if tanks come down, they'll fall and not be able to come back out.
자식으로
So we made these walls, these obstacles in the shape of like a U.
잘 이제 올라가는데 그런데 빠져
So we built these anti-tank traps to make sure that tanks would fall and not be able to come back out.
진짜 춥고 배고프고
So the private first-class soldier's life was cold, hungry,
형 생활 이등
painful.
거기서 했죠. 진짜 손
There wasn't even time to wash my hands. And later on, because I didn't wash my hands and there was no water, not only did the back of my hands become chapped, but also the palms of my hands.
진짜 힘들게 거기서 훈련을
So very difficultly, I received training there and did construction. And later on, I was chosen to go into financial affairs.
이제 그 텐트 안에서
So it wasn't too difficult on the body, and I could stay inside of the tent
근데
at the construction site.
힘들지 않은데 야, 그 소무게는요.
But I was very pressured mentally. I thought that I could stay comfortably inside of the office,
막상요.
but at first, my senior officer, he didn't make me do anything else but bring colored pencils and newspapers.
그래가지고 사무실
So I was residing in this office,
시험
and he told me to start writing things like A, B, C.
소무게는
Because in financial affairs, you have to have good handwriting. And because I didn't, this is how he started training me.
야 이거 유치원생
At first,
애가 대학
I wrote it.
시험
However, according to my thoughts and heart, I was thinking, I'm not a kindergartner.
내 생각대로
I graduated from college and I have to write this.
그게 고참이 마음에 안 들어.
But my senior officer didn't like this. The senior, he wasn't even a meter, over a meter tall. I was a meter 75. I'm 10 centimeters taller than him. I weighed about 80 kilograms. He didn't even weigh 65 or 70 kilograms. So he was very skinny. And I was 25 years old while he was 23. But he was a sergeant and I was a private with just one stripe. I was older and I was bigger. He graduated from Suncheon University in agriculture. So even my education was higher. But does the army work by age, by education? He was smaller, and he had a lower education, but because he was my senior, I had to do as I was told. And he didn't want to lose to me, so sitting at his desk, he was always lower than me, but if he wanted to hit me, above the desk, there was an iron desktop. So he would get on top of the desk and with his workbook hit me on the head. Or if he'd get annoyed, he would get a 50 centimeter ruler. It's 50 centimeters, so if you hit it with the wide side, then it might break. So he would stand it up, and just like he's cutting firewood, bam, he would hit my head. And it felt like my head was going to burst, and I would scream, "Ah!" And from the top of the desk, he would kick me, and I would fall onto the bare ground. Then from then on, I'd be in the plank position, standing on my head. Actually, if you do this for 1 or 2 minutes, it feels like your neck is going to break. Your feet start to shake. And after 5 minutes, you're shaking. And they run over to you, saying that you've loosened up too much, and they start hitting you on the back and on the thighs. And as they hit you, you fall onto the ground. Then you have to get back up, and you have to do the plank position using your head again. So you have to do this plank position with your head for at least 20 minutes in the morning in order to start working. So it was pitiful. This could never be in society, and if it is, then you could fight back. But in the army, you can't. So I thought, wow, God must really be refining me here, in this, furnace. It felt so chaotic at times. If it wasn't for me serving God, if there wasn't any God, because we were at the front lines, then I could receive ammunition for my M16 and go out on guard duty. And the senior who hit me was from educational affairs and I was from financial affairs. And our general was supposed to manage the ammunition, but he wasn't interested in managing it. So sometimes he didn't like to open up the ammunition locker and lock it back up. So the educational affairs and financial affairs, we had the keys. Sometimes educational affairs would be annoyed and they would just give me the key. And my senior would ask me to open up the locker to get ammunition. But at sometimes I wanted to load the ammunition, and I wanted to just, shoot up my senior. At times that kind of heart would arise. I thought, wow, I'm really not human. What kind of God do I serve? At times that evil heart inside of me would arise. So when I started to receive this training, I started to forget God in my heart. For a year, I lived suffering and being trampled on by that senior. However, after a year, all the construction was finished, and we were going nearby the area that is Ilsan today. And as we were going down to our original base, my body got a little more comfortable. I was getting used to the military life. But at that time, we had a military chaplain at our base, but this person didn't even come from a theological university. But he had connections, and in order for him to live a comfortable military life, his parents made him receive training as a military chaplain through their connections. So this person gathered people for service time, but because he couldn't preach the word, he would ask me to do it. He was a senior to me, and at our battalion there were more than 50 Christians. So he would gather all of them and clean, then sing, and at that time all I needed to do was go and preach. So if you see it in a certain way, it's quite comfortable, because I could go there and preach, and I can preach the gospel. And because I was living there for a year already, I had some breathing space. However, one day, my senior officer told me, on Sunday, you can never go to church. If you go to church, you're going to die, because this is your work, but the general's making me do it, so you have to do it together with me on Sunday. If you go to church today, I'm going to kill you. Yes, I'll do it together with you. So I woke up early in the morning and received the work from the general and took care of it with the educational affairs senior officer. However, at around 10 o'clock, my senior officer went to the bathroom or somewhere. That's when I lost my mind. This is the moment. And I ran away. And when I arrived at church, people were singing and waiting for me. So it was my turn, and I went forward and I preached the word. I preached for 10 or 20 minutes. However, the back door suddenly opened. And my senior officer, the educational affairs guy, he came all the way to the church. And he was telling me to hurry and come out from the back. But because I kept preaching, he made a fist. That means if you don't come out, I'm going to kill you. Whatever, if I die today, then I die. Let me just preach and die. So I preached for over an hour and a half, longer than other times. When I finished and came down and got back into my right mind, I realized, wow, I'm dead today. My senior officer came all the way down here and got angry and told me to step down and called me, but I didn't. So when I go back, I'm dead. Now our base was big, it was wide. From the chapel to our office, it was about a 1 kilometer distance. So that path that I was walking felt like I was being dragged to hell, and I was shaking. I got to the office door, and I was holding onto the doorknob, but I couldn't hold it anymore. I was shaking, and I slightly opened the door. But the senior soldier wasn't there. Oh, I'm going to live. So I sat at my desk to work, but I felt like a bat was going to come flying at me and hit me against the head. It felt like he would hit me with the head of his M16. I was so afraid that I couldn't work. Now, our office was connected to the barracks. However, I felt like he was watching me from the barracks door. I was so afraid of when he would run in towards me. I went towards the door of the barracks and slightly opened it. But he was already there. And if he was on the floor, he would be too small to hit me. But he was already on the bed. He was 50 centimeters, and as soon as I stepped foot inside of the barracks, he lost his mind. So with both of his combat boots, he could hit my shoulders, my thighs, my legs, but he couldn't hit me straight in the face. From the moment I entered, from the bed, he hit me in my face. Because I fell over, he jumped from his bed, that high place, and he kicked my head here and there as if he was kicking a ball. I thought I was going to die there.
그래서 결국에는
So eventually,
응급실에
I
병원에
was hospitalized at the infirmary for a week.
그 후로
Afterwards,
내가 앙심을
if I was spiteful, then I could accuse him,
그 고참도 영장.
and my senior would go to the brig because I had wounds.
근데 그때
However,
내가 한편으로
I thought on one side, sure,
하나님 믿다가
be happy that you were persecuted while believing in God.
네가
God said, when you go through these things, to accept it as happiness.
너 그리고 네가
It's embarrassing for you to be trampled on for any of the sins you committed in this world, but if you were preaching the gospel and word and got trampled on for that, God is watching and God knows.
언젠간 지금은
I can't understand right now, but sooner or later, God will compensate me. So after that incident, I didn't say anything to my senior officer or to the general. I just buried it and moved on. So that senior officer was discharged from the army a few months later, and in his place, a lower rank private came. So that private said to me, Sergeant Kim, I heard that a long time ago you used to witness and have Bible study, but why don't you do it these days? I want to learn about the Bible too. Please teach me about the Bible. Hey, I was beat up by my senior, and if you receive salvation and believe in Jesus, then I can't hit you. So I will never preach the gospel or have Bible study with you. So that is how I clearly decided in my heart. And then I tried to get vacation to go to the retreat, but I didn't get the vacation. It didn't work out how I wanted to, but I thought, let me preach the gospel to the low-rank private as if I was at the retreat. And that low-ranking private received salvation. At that time, I realized the amazing providence of God. It was like Acts chapter 16. Paul was preaching the gospel and was beat up and locked up in prison. However, God created an earthquake and opened the doors, and the guards tried to commit suicide. But Paul said, I'm here. Why are you trying to commit suicide? Through that incident, he was able to preach the gospel to the guards, and their families received salvation. However, here, there is a strange Bible verse, Acts chapter 16, verse 30, verse 33. This is what it says. And he took them the same hour of the night, and washed their stripes, and was baptized, he and all his straightway. So Paul, his stripes were washed. Who washed those stripes? Surely, when he went inside of the prison, he was hit. So he could wash his stripes and clean them, but he just left them as they were. And the prison guard received salvation and washed his stripes. So the wounds of my heart being trampled on, I cannot wash them. And with my methods, I'm in torment. And even though I shoot and kill my senior officer with the M16, would those wash them away? Would that repay my enemy? Even so, my heart would be in torment and pain. Be free from it. Although I was trampled on, although I received persecution and it was difficult, after that senior was discharged, the lower rank private that came after him received salvation. At that time, all the stripes were washed away, just like verse 33.
그러면서 하나님이
When I
내가 몸을 버려서
threw away my body
하나님만 섬겼을 때
and
하나님이
only
저를
served
높이신
God,
거예요.
then God
이
promoted
다니엘서
me.
3장에서
Just like we clearly shared in Daniel chapter 3.
분명히 이제 느낄 수 있었 우리가 말씀을 나눴던 것처럼 28절
Chapter 3, verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who believed no other god outside of this God, were promoted more than anyone in Babylon. Because of the gospel, I was trampled on, persecuted, and thrown away, but God protected me and promoted me. For me, this Daniel chapter 3, when Daniel's 3 friends were thrown into the fire, just how God did not touch a hair on their heads or have the burnt smell passed onto them. When I was trampled on by the senior officer and persecuted, God held onto my heart. And if I flowed towards the emotion of man, then I would have no choice but to be thrown away. But at that moment, God protected my heart. And God is so amazing. And another thing I was thankful for was for the lower-ranked privates who received salvation. Now there's a pastor in Fiji and another pastor in Kazakhstan. When these people received salvation, they lived inside of the church and they became pastors and missionaries. At that time, there were more than 10 brothers who received salvation and came to church. Now many of them have gone to the world, but amongst them still, 2 are inside of our church and have become pastors and missionaries. When I saw them serve the gospel, I'm so thankful. Even though I was trampled on and persecuted in the army, when I saw God appear inside of them, all the wounds in my heart were washed away. If I served myself and didn't want to be trampled on and just avoided preaching the gospel, then I could never see the amazing works of God inside of me. However, at that time, it was very difficult and hard, just like when I went to the Nonsan training camp. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. With my current situation, when I was in the army, I was just like dirt, trampled on and thrown away. But God wanted to make me into pure gold, and I threw myself away. Yeah, let me just be trampled here and die. And what value is there me in being promoted? Daniel's 3 friends knew this. More than me bowing to this image of gold, it is better for me to die in the fiery furnace. Rather than serving the idol, I'll die in the fiery furnace. There's no value in serving myself. It's okay if I'm thrown away. If I live serving myself, I'll eventually be thrown away anyways, so is there any value of me serving myself and living? It's okay if I'm thrown away. With this kind of a heart, I served the gospel, and God did not allow me to be thrown away. At that time, I thought I was thrown away. At times, my existence was miserable, like the peel of a grain on the threshing ground, to be blown away and disappear. Is it going to end here? There were many times I lost all strength to preach the gospel and felt I couldn't do it. But then God did not let the fire cease and go out, and He held on to this rotten reed. I did not preach there through my will. Many times I gave up.
하나님이 나를 지켜주잖아. 내가 어떻게 거기서 복음을
If God didn't protect me, how would I have been able to preach the gospel there? It was very difficult to preach the gospel in the army. It was difficult to read the word and to have service. But I could see how God was protecting me then.
그 박성성 목사나 양홍기 목사 이런 분들
There were many, Pastor Park and Pastor Yang.
야, 저들이
When I see them preaching the gospel and serving the gospel, I think they're better than me.
수밖에 없는 일들이 참 많았었는데
There were many times where I had no choice but to give up,
제 마음은
but those times, God protected my heart. That is how Nebuchadnezzar said, "Wow, the God inside of you is amazing." And that is how he praises God. Just like how he promoted them above all people in Babylon. At times I thought that my life that's been trampled upon would end. I had no more strength to live for the gospel. And I was disappointed as if I was just thrown away. However, God did not leave me alone. He was making it so I could be someone who excels above all people. So just like I shared in our first session, the words of Ephesians brightened my eyes. And God raised me to excel above all people. Because the Jesus inside of me is so precious, Paul said, "For this Jesus to be revealed to his heart's content, there is a treasure in my earthen vessel. It seems like I'm a worthless earthen vessel, but Jesus Christ reveals himself inside of me to his heart's content. If I was gold, then Jesus Christ within me would just be covered. When I serve myself and raise myself, Jesus inside of me always becomes worthless and disappears. However, if I am a worthless earthen vessel, when I pour Jesus on me and the scent of Jesus appears, that scent is very fragrant and amazing. I was not someone with the faith to live with the gospel, but God, through the army, just like it says in 2 Timothy chapter 2, a good soldier of Jesus Christ. A Christian, a soldier, is not busy with their own life, but only makes the recruiter pleased. I do not live in this world to make myself happy, but I give my body to God for the will that pleases Him, and I give my life to God so that He can use me to His heart's content. Then I will surely be able to see the amazing love of God that He has for me." Daniel's three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, met this God. They surely thought that they were thrown away into the fiery furnace and that their lives were over, but when they came out, they saw that they were gold. They were just thrown away like a particle. But they received the leading of God, and after going through the process, "When He hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold." I just throw my body before God and am led wherever God leads me, and He is making me into gold. However, the people of this world think of themselves as pure gold. They think of themselves as gold, so they serve themselves, but in the end, they just disappear like a particle. However, Christians say, "I am an earthen vessel. If God leads me however He wants and uses me, then one day God will promote and exalt me." That God is surely watching, and I have no choice but to praise Him. When I was in the army, I met God. God worked in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That God was surely inside of me too. I thought that my life ended there, but God hath tried me, and I shall come forth as gold. Before Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown, Nebuchadnezzar was angry and despised them and just threw them into the fiery furnace. However, inside of there, God protected them, and not a hair of their head singed, nor did the smell of fire pass on them. Nebuchadnezzar saw this God and he praised God. Before going into the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown away without hesitation like particles of dust. However, they were not just thrown away, but after being tried, they were changed into gold. And when God established them, Nebuchadnezzar kneeled down in front of the three friends of Daniel and promoted them above all the people in Babylon. I feel very often that God led me like this. Everyone threw me away, but God led me to be a precious servant to preach the gospel with power. I saw the amazing providence of God that established me and made me excel over all people in Babylon. When I see chapter 3, I think, oh, God led me in the army like this. I praise that God. And all of you as well, although it seems like you are being trampled on at times, as you endure it and have patience as you continue to serve the gospel, God will exalt you above all people. Christians are most happy when we praise that God and when we give thanks to that God while we live. Through you, this God will appear. We praise that God. Okay, I will speak up to here. Thank you and goodbye.